The modest grocery shop owner quietly wrapped a few goods, placed them in the young mother's bag, and motioned that they were free. He asked no questions and made no requests in return. However, the next morning, the entire neighborhood remained transfixed as a fleet of armored military vehicles filled the street in front of his store, and a general emerged. If you think that good deeds come back to you, type YES to show kindness. James was 58 years old. The proprietor of a modest food store in an impoverished Texas neighborhood. His shop has been open for 20 years, thriving solely on its reputation. No showy signs, no advertising campaigns, just honest service every day. Late one day, as shadows extended across the ancient linoleum floor, a young mother arrived, grasping the hands of two little children. Their clothes were shabby, and their eyes were wide with a hunger James had seen all too often. She carefully chose a few necessities, including bread, eggs, and fruit, counting pennies in her palm between each one. At the register, her expression sank as she counted again. Then, once more. The entire amount was $24.63. She only had $18.75. "I'm very sorry," she whispered as she attempted to return the stuff. "Maybe it's just the bread and eggs." The children's gazes followed the fruit as she laid it aside. James spotted the child, who was little older than 5, gripping her brother's hand tightly. Without saying anything, James repackaged everything, even a carton of milk and a box of cookies that the kids had been admiring. He gently pushed the bag across the countertop. "Ma'am, we do not charge hungry prices here. Please take this." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "I cannot accept." "Please," James insisted quietly. "It is nothing." Her shoulders relaxed somewhat. "My husband has just been discharged. He is still looking for work to cover his mother's hospital fees." Her voice trailed off. "You don't have to explain," James said with a tiny nod. A client in line stared at them, mumbling just loudly enough to be heard. "Charity cases now. Is this a business or a handout center?" James did not respond. He simply lowered his gaze and started wiping down the counter, his old hands tracing familiar circles across the laminate surface. The mom gathered her belongings, whispered a thank you, and hurried out with her children. The impatient customer continued to stare disapprovingly, phone in hand, angrily tapping the screen. Later that evening, James discovered that the dissatisfied customer had recorded the incident and posted it online with the comment, "Local store owner enables freeloaders, killing honest business." The comments were already piling up. Some were encouraging, but many reiterated the original stance. That night, after closing up, James stood alone in the darkened store. The only light came from the street lamps outside, which cast sweeping shadows across the vacant aisles. His fingertips touched the borders of an ancient military medal displayed behind the counter. A little bronze star is virtually invisible among old family photographs. His face spoke nothing, but his eyes contained decades of memories few could comprehend. By morning, the video had circulated on local social media networks. The comments area was filled with mocking and assaults, drowning out the few words of support. "I wouldn't be surprised if his apartment is robbed clean next." A local influencer with thousands of followers said, "He's practically inviting it." The post got hundreds of likes. Customers who usually stopped in for a morning coffee and newspaper paused outside. Some refused to be affiliated with the store, which was swiftly becoming a local scandal. Mrs. Taylor, who had been buying groceries from James for 15 years, crossed the street to avoid his window. When James caught her sight, she hurriedly looked away, trying not to notice him. At midday, Robert Jensen, an old buddy from the local business association, came in, leaning across the counter conspiratorially. "Listen, Mike. This is just some kind counsel. This bleeding heart crap doesn't function anymore. Nobody appreciates it, and it's detrimental to business. You cannot save everyone." James continued to replenish shelves. "Never attempted to save everyone, Tom. Simply doing what seems proper. Isn't it paying your rent? Robert gestured at the practically empty store. Times change. You've got to adjust. As Robert went, James turned on his old radio, replacing the news with a Johnny Cash song that filled the silence. He hummed calmly, continuing with his task as if nothing had changed. That evening, James's longtime delivery driver arrived, but he did not bring his customary supply order. Sorry, Mike, he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. The boss advises we should hold off for a while. Something about that viral video, the company's image, and all that. James nodded. I understand. The driver paused. For what it's worth, my father was also a veteran. I would have appreciated what you did. James looked up with amazement. The driver shrugged. I saw your medal years ago. I never discussed it because you didn't. After closing, James sat at the small desk in his rear office and wrote a note by hand. He taped it on the front door and left. To my loyal customers, I assume full responsibility if my actions caused any inconvenience. This store has always tried to serve the community with dignity. That policy remains unaltered. He locked up and took a slow walk home through the quiet streets. His flat was only 3 blocks away, a tiny one-bedroom above a laundromat. He sat on his balcony, watching the neighborhood descend into darkness, joined by the sounds of machines churning below. His fingers discovered the identical medal he kept in his pocket, the twin of the one at his store. He touched the raised metal with his thumb, which was familiar with every groove and contour. His thoughts wandered back to the desert heat, the faces of individuals he'd met decades before, and vows made when tomorrow wasn't certain. Many people turned their backs, but he opted to silently do what was right. If you believe that compassion should never be disrespected, type HOPE. The next morning, the rumbling of big engines interrupted the customary silence. Residents peered through curtains as 5 military transport vehicles parked on the street in front of James's store. Men and women in full uniform emerged to form a line on the sidewalk. Mrs. Taylor, who had avoided the store yesterday, was now standing on her doorstep, watching. The local barber strolled out, apron still on and scissors in hand. Even the adolescents, who normally ignored everything, paused their skating to stare. Neighbors gathered across the street, iPhones lifted to record what was happening. Speculation spread throughout the gathered crowd. Is this about yesterday? Are they shutting him down? Maybe this is a raid. A woman walked forward from the uniformed crowd. The same young mother as 2 days before, now dressed in a clean army uniform studded with service decorations. Her spouse stood beside her, dressed in blue, his posture tight and formal. Their children, who were now clothed neatly, stood between them, wide-eyed. Following them was an elderly man with silver hair and 3 stars on his shoulders. His presence drew instant notice as he approached the business, where James stood behind the counter, his face unreadable. The general arrived first, his cap tucked under his arm. The store went hushed as he extended his hand to James. Chief Warrant Officer James Carrington, he said, his voice echoing around the small room. It has been a long time. The mob outside gathered against the windows, trying to hear. We've decided to repay a debt that has been on our books for far too long. The general proceeded. You never requested for this debt to be recognized. The young woman stepped forward. Sir, I recognized your medal while we were here. My husband served with the 75th Rangers. When I described it to him, he recognized you right away. Her spouse nodded. The Mogadishu Angel was the medic who refused to leave. The general turned to face the increasing audience. Chief Carrington served as a military medic in Somalia 30 years ago. When our position was overwhelmed, he remained behind with the wounded despite direct orders to evacuate. For 16 hours, he maintained 7 guys alive under intense fire until extraction was feasible. He hesitated, his gaze riveted on James. I was one of the 7 men. The store went silent. He received the Silver Star, which he has never shown. After being discharged, he retreated into civilian life, never speaking about his service or seeking accolades. The young woman's spouse came forward. When my wife told me what had transpired, I phoned my previous commander. Word spread among the troops. We all wanted to be present today. The local Veterans Association president, who arrived with the caravan, addressed the throng. Not every hero wears a uniform. Some wear aprons and follow the same code of honor every day. One by one, each serviceman approached James, giving him a proper salute that he returned with the accuracy of muscle memory that had never faded. Outside, the audience that had arrived to witness a scandal found itself watching something quite different, a quiet guy finally being exposed for who he truly was. That afternoon, people poured into the modest business. They did not come to buy anything. They came to thank you. A small youngster gave James a hand-drawn card with a simple message. I hope to grow up to be like you. An old veteran put a tattered photograph on the counter. A group of young males wearing desert fatigues, arms wrapped around each other's shoulders. We still remember, Mike replied, his voice breaking. Mrs. Taylor returned carrying handmade empanadas. She looked downcast as she whispered, for your dinner. And I apologize for yesterday. The local news crew arrived, but James declined to do interviews. He explained that the story was not about me. It's important to remember that we're all simply trying to get by. Robert Jensen returned too, uncomfortably offering to bring coffee for everyone. He murmured, the least I could do. The man who had posted the original video arrived last, and he deleted it openly on his phone while everyone watched. I was mistaken, he conceded, the words evidently alien to his tongue. James stood peacefully through it all, one hand resting on his medal, which he now proudly displays. A faint smile spread across his face, the first many had seen in years. The general was the last visitor, carrying a precisely folded American flag. He delivered it to James in a proper manner. James had joined his brothers and sisters in arms for the first time in 30 years. Some people spend their entire lives without seeking applause. They only need to see once that being kind is never bad. You might forget this story in a few days, but if no one retells it, history will remain quiet forever. Subscribe to Incredible Stories, where justice, generosity, and memory are upheld to the end.